Imagine a silent predator slithering through gilded halls, feasting on flesh and secrets alike. That's syphilis. This merciless curse paid no heed to crowns or noble bloodlines, burrowing beneath sumptuous portraits and silken sheets to rot empires from within. In its wake lay brilliant minds shattered, bodies decaying, marriages hollowed, and love poisoned by hidden infection. Join us as we reveal the top 5 royals ensnared by this disfiguring scourge and the chilling secrets they thought they'd buried forever. 1. Louis. I was born in 1838, the second son of Queen Maria II. He was never meant to rule. His older brother, Pedro, was crowned king at just 16 after their mother died, giving birth. That left Louis with all the luxury and none of the responsibility, a dream life for a young royal. He buried himself in books, learning languages and diving into literature. In fact, Louis loved Shakespeare so much that he translated many of the bard's plays into Portuguese. But Louis wasn't just a bookworm. He was also a smooth talker who used his charm and linguistic talents to win the hearts of countless women. Life was good. He was the playboy prince of Portugal. Then disaster struck. In 1861, a deadly outbreak, possibly typhoid or cholera, swept through the royal family. It killed not only Pedro V but also his younger brothers, Fernando and Joan. Just like that, Louis became king, and suddenly the Banana dynasty was in deep trouble. It needed heirs fast. Louis wrote letters to Queen Victoria of England, his cousin, and King Leopold I of Belgium, his great-uncle, begging for advice on a suitable wife. Both recommended Maria Theresa of Austria, but there was a problem. She was only 16, and her father refused the match. Instead, Louis married Maria Pia of Savoy, the 14-year-old daughter of the King of Italy. Her father was thrilled by the royal union. Maria Pia, for her part, was smitten. Her new husband was handsome, artistic, and intelligent. By the time she turned 18, she had already given birth to 2 sons and fully embraced her role as a devoted mother. But behind closed doors, the marriage was a wreck. Maria Pia's fairy tale began to crumble when she realized she wasn't the only woman in Louis's life. He was still chasing other lovers, especially a popular actress named Rosa de Lima. The queen, heartbroken and furious, began taking long trips abroad, and rumor has it she may have had her own secret affairs. At some point in this tangled web of royal liaisons, Louis contracted syphilis. At first, the infection lay dormant, but in 1887, the disease came roaring back and it hit hard. Louis developed neurosyphilis, a terrifying advanced stage that attacks the brain and nervous system. He suffered depression, mood swings, intense headaches, sightseers, and gradual mental decline. The once charming Scholar King was now a shadow of himself. He died in 1889 at just 50 years old, after years of silent suffering. 2. Born in 1632, Abbas II inherited the throne of Persia, modern-day Iran, at just 9 years old. He was no puppet ruler. By the time he was 15, he had kicked out his father's Grand Vizier and taken full control of the Safavid Empire. At first, Abbas ruled well. He avoided war with the powerful Ottomans, scored military victories against the Mughals and Russians, and became known for his fairness and tolerance. Under his rule, the Persian people enjoyed a rare era of peace and safety. But Abbas had a wild side. He loved luxury, wine, and women. His parties were legendary, filled with music, dancing, and overflowing goblets of alcohol. He even drank from a golden cup inlaid with rubies, a gift from the Tsar of Russia. Yet not even gold could ease his frustration when the empire's economy began to crumble. Faced with problems he couldn't fix, Abbas threw himself deeper into his private pleasures. His wild parties grew more intense, and after particularly debauched nights, he would disappear from public life for weeks. Abbas owned a massive harem of concubines, many of them enslaved women taken from lands the empire had conquered. It's unclear exactly how or when he caught syphilis, but by 1666 he was falling apart. At just 34 years old, Abbas was in terrible health, showing all the signs of late-stage syphilis. Some historians suspect his harem may have also been infected. His once vibrant body and mind began to break down. That year, the party ended for good. Abbas II died of syphilis, leaving his declining empire in the hands of his son, the son of Emperor France, Joseph I. 3. And the beloved Emperor Rudolph, born in 1858, was expected to inherit a powerful throne. But what he inherited instead was trauma, abuse, and eventually syphilis. Torn from his sister Gisela at age 6 and raised by an abusive tutor, Rudolph grew into a man marked by instability. He drank heavily, indulged in risky affairs, and couldn't be reined in. At 23, he was married off to Princess Stephanie of Belgium, who was 17 at the time. But even during their courtship, Rudolph brought his current mistress to the introduction. After their daughter was born, Rudolph grew cold. Then came the real disaster. He caught gonorrhea and syphilis, passing the infection to Stephanie. She didn't know what it was. Doctors said it was a stomach flu. The true result was that her fallopian tubes were destroyed. She would never have another child. Furious and betrayed, Stephanie refused to sleep with him again and openly loved a Polish count. Rudolph fell into despair. He begged his mistress, Mitty Casper, to die with him. She refused and went to the police. No one listened, so he turned to a 17-year-old noble girl, Baroness Mary Vetra, who was infatuated with him. On the 30th of January, 1889, they were found dead at Myling Lodge. She had been shot in the head. He died by suicide hours later. Her body was secretly propped in a carriage with a broomstick and buried in a potter's field. Officials claimed Rudolph died of an aneurysm to preserve the family's honor, but everyone knew the truth. Disease, madness, and despair had killed the future of the empire. 4. At number 2, we meet the original bad boy of Restoration England, John Wilmot, the Earl of Rochester. Born in 1647, his father had been a royal war hero, and young John inherited his title at just 11. King Charles II took him under his wing, and it didn't take long for the Prince of Poetry to become the Prince of Debauchery. By 13, John was already at Oxford, where he was said to have grown debauched. After graduation, he toured Europe, soaking in Enlightenment philosophy and likely contracting more than one disease. Back in England, the king pushed him to court Elizabeth Marl, a rich and beautiful heiress. She liked him, but her family didn't, so John and his mother did the unthinkable. They abducted her. She was rescued, and John was tossed into the Tower of London. Eventually, he was released. To redeem himself, he fought in the Second Dutch War and returned a war hero. Elizabeth was won over. She married him, and they had 4 children. But the moment John returned to London, he forgot his family and rejoined the infamous Merry Gang, a group of nobles who lived to party. He had a long affair with actress Nell Gwynn, who later became the king's mistress, and helped launch the career of Elizabeth Barry, another mistress and mother of his child. But when her fame grew, John turned bitter and left her. In the midst of all this chaos, John wrote biting satire and dazzling poetry. But when he mocked the king's sexual obsessions in a play performed before the court, he was banished, rebranding himself as Dr. Bendo. He toured London, disguised as a quack fertility doctor, sometimes even as Mrs. Bendo, allowing him to examine young wives alone. Many of them did become pregnant, likely by him. By 33, syphilis had devoured him. His nose rotted, his vision vanished, and he lost control of his body. 5. He died in 1680, blind, incontinent, and ravaged by the disease he had spent years spreading. Born in 1678, Joseph was the eldest son of Emperor Leopold I, making him heir to one of the most powerful thrones in Europe. He was raised with high expectations and surrounded by progressive thinkers and beautiful women. From a young age, Joseph loved pleasure. He threw wild parties, entertained lavishly, and indulged in endless affairs. But when he turned 21, his mother, Empress Eleonora, had seen enough. She wanted her son to settle down. Her choice of bride was Wilhelmina Amalia of Brunswick-Lundberg, a serious and devout woman 5 years older than Joseph. Before the marriage, she was medically examined to ensure her fertility, a chilling reminder that royal women were expected to produce heirs, not receive love. The wedding was a grand spectacle. At first, they were happy, but that didn't last long. Joseph quickly grew bored of monogamy. Every time he left for a hunting trip, his close friend, Count Lambert, provided him with young peasant girls for his pleasure. Noble ladies, too, were eager to share his bed. One of them, Countess Marianne Pali, became his official mistress, a title unheard of in conservative Austria. The scandal shook the court. Even the Pope complained. Empress Elena was outraged and had her son's fixer thrown in prison. But when Joseph inherited the throne in 1705, he was untouchable. As emperor, his bedroom door stayed wide open, and nothing could slow his hunger for women. Yet amid his pleasures, he still returned to his wife from time to time. Wilhelmina gave birth to 3 children, including a son. But that boy, Leopold, died before his first birthday, struck down by hydrophilis. It was now urgent for Joseph and Wilhelmina to produce a healthy male heir. Then disaster struck. Joseph, in all his carelessness, caught syphilis allegedly from the daughter of a palace gardener. Instead of protecting his wife, he passed the infection to her. Knowingly or not, Wilhelmina, pious and naive, believed her symptoms were the result of some impurity within herself. She prayed for healing. She prayed for a son. She got neither. The syphilis had rendered her infertile. Now the future of the Habsburg dynasty fell on the shoulders of Joseph's younger brother, Charles, and his wife, Elizabeth. But fate wasn't kind to them either. Their only son, Leopold Johann, died as an infant. Desperate, Charles turned to bizarre methods. He filled Elizabeth's rooms with paintings of muscular nude men, thinking it would ignite her imagination and encourage her to conceive a boy. Her doctors put her on a strict diet of liquor and rich foods to boost her fertility. Instead, she became obese and addicted to alcohol. She did give birth to 3 more children, but they were all daughters. Meanwhile, Joseph's reign was falling apart. He spent 6 years failing to secure a real victory in the War of Spanish Succession, and he earned infamy by expelling Romani people from his empire. For all his energy in the bedroom, his political career was exhausting and fruitless. On his deathbed, the 32-year-old emperor promised his heartbroken wife that if he survived, he would finally remain faithful. He never had to keep that promise. He died in 1711, his reign as short as it was scandalous. Before his death, Joseph had signed an agreement, making Charles his heir, but also stating that Joseph's daughters would inherit if Charles had no sons. Charles, however, wasn't having that.